It's time for the Your Personal Bank Show with Ferenc Toth, financial literacy educator and speaker, entrepreneur, and chairman of the board of A Bank Information. Take charge of your financial future with Your Personal Bank. Now here's Ferenc Toth.
Welcome to the Your Personal Bank Show, and I'll tell you what, I was talking a lot about in the last show, really about how this concept works, because I have a lot of listeners that have been responding, and I really appreciate that. It helps me know. The feedback really does help me know what I should cover and what you're interested in. And I've been talking about a lot of the political aspects of things lately and how it affects our money, finances, taxes, all that. And I felt like it was time to take a step back and go back to how does your personal bank work? How does the concept work? How do you maximize your rate of returns, enhance rate of returns, receive the positive arbitrage, reduce your taxes, okay? Gain control of your money again, because so many people I meet and talk to really don't have control of their money. And I'm going to encourage you to go to yourpersonalbank.com. You can listen to any of the previously recorded shows, but if you listen to the previous show, it really does talk about how your personal bank works. I talk about some of the primary uses of it in terms of increasing rate of return on investments, reducing interest costs on debt, and using it to receive positive arbitrage, even say when you purchase items, okay? Really, really powerful tool. This is a tremendously powerful financial tool. And I guess maybe one of the most important aspects of it, and I guess it kind of fits into the way things are, the way things are going, and way it feels like we just don't have the freedoms and level of control we used to have. This is a way of grabbing back control of your money. I mean, let's be honest. Who's going to do a better job of managing our money? Us or the government or someone else. Okay, and the reality is when you use I call it the government system, the IRA, 401k retirement system, right? You're counting on the rules as they stand, let's say, for your retirement. Now, am I saying you shouldn't do an IRA or 401k? No, it's not what I'm saying. One of the things is if you have a company match, for example, that's free money, sort of. It's not really free money. It's actually part of your employment package, isn't it? If you can negotiate with the company to pay you that money instead of putting in your 401k, in many cases I find, when we run the numbers, you'd be better off anyway. Why? Well, several reasons. First of all, most of the time, most of the money in these IRAs and 401ks are invested in the market. Now, have the markets done well over the past decade? No question. Will they continue to going forward? Big question, big unknown. Hard to say. Secondly, of course, whenever you do access monies from your IRA or 401k, it's 100% taxable. Why? Quite simply because you deferred the tax. You didn't pay any tax on the money going in. Now, the question you have to answer is, and this is what I so frequently discuss with people, they never ever even considered or compared what is the impact of deferring my taxes now, in other words, kicking the can down the road, versus paying the tax now and let it grow tax-free for life. In other words, would you rather pay taxes on the seed or the harvest? What do I mean by that? Well, if you contribute to a traditional IRA or 401k, you're deferring the tax on your contribution, the money now. So you're deferring the tax on the seed, and therefore when you take it out later, you're going to pay taxes on the harvest. Now, depending on the amount of time we're talking about from when you contribute to when you withdraw, will the amount of money be larger? Well, ideally, yes. I mean, that's the goal, right? You want to put the money away so it grows and there's more there when you retire to supplement retirement, right? Let's say it doubled or quadrupled or even more. Well, the more it grows, the more your tax liability and the more you're going to owe taxes on. The bigger pile of money you're going to have to pay tax on, right? Now, here's two powerful questions you have to answer. And unfortunately, there's no real answer. The first one is, the simpler one is, can you tell me what the tax rate is going to be when you withdraw that money? In other words, can you tell me what the tax rate's going to be in 5 years or 10 or 20 or even longer? And of course, that answer is impossible to know, right? Do you think tax rates might go higher in the future? The Biden administration has come out openly stating they want to increase taxes. So I think the direction of where taxes are going is fairly obvious. Take the level of debt that the government has taken on, the amount of spending that's happened, particularly in the past year, but even going previous to that, over the last couple of decades, frankly, several decades. And it's almost inconceivable to see how taxes could be less. You see what I'm saying? So if you're paying, think about this a minute. Again, this is a question that most people have never even asked or thought about when it comes to their IRAs or 401ks. And, we're talking about your retirement here. This is, and oftentimes for many people, this is their primary source. It's going to be their primary source of income for retirement. And they've never, ever asked the question or even looked at it. In other words, I ask all the time, why are you doing this? And the answer I most often get is, well, it's what everybody else does. Or what other option is there? Folks, there's a lot of different options out there. Don't let somebody try to pigeonhole you into a direction because, well, that's just what everybody else does. I mean, I suppose if you want to get the results that everybody else gets, they always say, if you want to get what 95% get, do what 95% do, right? But if you want to get what 5% get, well, you got to do something a little different. Here's the question that you need to answer, or at least analyze this and make a educated guess, because there's no hard answer, because some of these things are unknowns, like what's the future tax rate going to be? We don't know. But the question you really need to answer is, again, is it better to pay tax on the seed versus the harvest? Should you defer the taxes now on a smaller amount to then later have to pay them when you take them out on probably a much larger amount at an unknown future rate? Does that even make sense? The answer is it depends. It depends on your current income level, what your future income level is going to be. That's one of the arguments we hear all the time is, well, you'll be in a lower tax bracket when you retire. Well, let me give you some facts on that, some statistics. Forget the noise. Study after study has shown that the average retiree, over 80% of retirees, are in the same tax bracket in retirement or higher than they were when they were working. Why? Well, things like Social Security benefits are taxable based on certain limits. Retirement income, IRA, 401k distributions are taxable, of course, when you take them. Investment returns and things like that can be taxable, obviously. So what ends up happening is oftentimes, and I work with many, many of these people, I have for over 20 years, they're surprised by how much tax they end up having to pay in retirement because they're like, oh, I thought we'd be in a lower bracket. I thought we'd be paying less in tax. And the statistics show, over 80% of the time, that not to be true. Also, I always say, look, being in a lower tax bracket in retirement means you're making less money, right? Does that even sound like a good goal? Generally speaking, no. The answer is no, because there's something called inflation out there. Now, frankly, this past decade or so, we haven't had to deal with inflation much. But historically speaking, it's a real thing. It's something that's going to eat away at the value of your dollar or your purchasing power. And on average, historically speaking, I'm going back over the last 100 years, the price of things double about every 20 years. What does that mean? Well, if you retire and you go out to eat, for example, and that meal costs you $20, let's say. Well, 20 years later, that same meal is going to cost you $40. Apply that to everything: food, gas, clothing, housing, everything. If the costs of basically everything doubles, do you have enough to retire? Do you have enough to live on? That's one of the number one fears retirees have. In fact, it is the number one fear. Study after study shows that. Am I going to run out of money before I run out of time? Inflation is an ugly thing when it comes to retirement income. It can be devastating. When you couple that with, again, I have to bring in the government debt that we have now and the printing of the money, more dollars, these COVID relief packages, quote unquote, and things like that. The amount of money, it's over $6 trillion over the last year or so. More dollars chasing items means inflation. The cost of the items go up. If inflation goes up higher than average, and you're trying to live off of a fixed income or retirement or fixed amount of assets, inflation can tremendously eat into and devastate a retiree's income. It's a scary thing. And higher inflation can really be devastating. It doesn't take a big change. And, well, just like it appears quite obvious that tax rates are going to be going higher in the future, certainly in the near future even, inflation rates, because of the amount of money that's been spent and printed and all that put into the system, inflation very likely is going to be a factor too. Higher inflation rates than normal. And that can definitely eat into a retirement. So why is your personal bank so powerful? Why is it so important, particularly now? It's used as part of your financial plan. Well, it's because you can pick up positive arbitrage on money you spent. In other words, you can pick up that 2 to 3% positive arbitrage on dollars you spend to supplement retirement. What does that mean? It means you'll have more dollars available to use and live on throughout the rest of your life. Could that 2 to 3% positive arbitrage compounded over time, could that make the difference? The answer is yes. It could be the difference of having the retirement that you want versus not. Every little bit's going to help, especially if inflation comes into play, which looks very likely. So stay tuned in the next segment. We're going to talk further about how some of these things are going to affect you, your money, and your retirement.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. And I'll tell you what, we've been talking a lot today about some fun stuff like, well, planning for your money, your retirement. How's your money going to grow for you? How's it going to be available for you in retirement? How is inflation, taxes going to, affect those things? We see going forward, this past decade or so, certainly we've seen low inflation, low interest rates, historically low in both counts. The challenges that has caused for those trying to retire on a fixed income, low interest rates. It's tough. In fact, I heard something today talking about if you retired, I believe, on $500,000 of treasury bonds, for example, a little over a decade ago, that would have generated about $35,000 of interest income annually on average. Today, that's closer to $3,500 in interest annually. Tenfold decrease. That's massive. And so folks that were working before and went into retirement in around or in or after this 08-09 sea change in terms of the low interest rate environment that's been around for the last decade plus, that's been a challenge for them. we probably are going to see some sea changes going forward in terms of taxes and inflation. Certainly we could see fixed interest rates climb. So that could be, but we could see other things being negatively affected because of inflation or taxes. Are you going to be able to navigate this properly, effectively? That's going to be a challenge. One of the advantages, like I said, is a starting point. Again, I'm a strong fan of the personal bank concept because of the positive arbitrage. The ability to keep the difference of what you're earning on dividends versus what you're getting charged interest rate-wise. By the way, I spoke on this in the last show. Again, go to yourpersonalbank.com to check it out if you missed it, or any of the previous shows for that matter. Talked about historically long-term, the dividends have been higher than the interest charged by the banks. Why? Because they're both highly interest rate sensitive. I've stated this numerous times. We have companies still paying 6% dividends even today in this low interest rate environment, and have for the last 25 plus years never missed a dividend since before the Civil War. That's powerful. But if you go back prior to 2008-09, most of the companies were paying 7 and 8% dividends. Why? Interest rate environment was different. The banks certainly, the bank lines were higher, but so were the dividends. So again, that 2 to 3% positive arbitrage has been it's been available for the most part. But one of the companies showed where it's been available every month for the last 40 years, except for 2 when it was the same. The dividend rate and the interest charge rate was the same. Every single month for the past 40 years, except for 2 months, which they were the same. Getting that positive arbitrage on money you spent, dollars you spent. Like I said, this is adding extra dollars in your pocket that you wouldn't otherwise have. Because here's the question we need to answer. It's quite simple. Do you spend money? That's a pretty obvious answer. We all spend money on things, right? Stuff we want and stuff we need. So what if you could pick up a couple, 3% on those dollars? Think about that a minute. How much do you spend a year, your household, for example? $50,000? $100,000? Depending on the household, $30,000? I don't know. The question is, if you picked up some interest on that money you spent each and every year, and then compound that over the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years or longer, do you realize how much more money you'd have? I've run the numbers many, many times with many folks, and there are significant amounts difference more. And not only just, I'm not talking about, the thousands or a few thousand. I'm talking about tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars difference more in folks' lifetime running these numbers. Again, everyone's situation will be different. And if you're one of those where you're older, obviously you don't have the compound interest time that you maybe had for a younger person. Well, why not consider getting it started for you and then passing this on tax-free to your heirs? And then they can continue it and benefit for the compounding and the tax-free benefits and the positive arbitrage on what you started. They could even continue to contribute to it, add to it as you go forward. We often use trusts and things like that to accomplish this, but it's done quite often. In fact, this is one of the primary tools wealthy families use to pass on wealth from one generation to the next on an income tax-free basis. It's very, very powerful. So one of my comments all the time is, well, if it works for them, why not for you and I? You see my point. It's certainly worth looking into. And like I said, contact me, yourpersonalbank.com, to do that. Again, I think going forward, looking at the situation that we're in, financially, politically, whatever, economically, I think what we need to start there needs to be a shift in thinking. There's definitely been a shift in terms of economics that's happening as we speak. There's a shift politically, obviously, and there's clearly looks like going to be a shift in terms of taxes and inflation. And we have to shift with it. We have to adjust accordingly with it. Otherwise, we get caught under the old set of rules and get burned by them. And if you wait until it all happens, oftentimes it can be too late to make that change. So one of the things I encourage people to do is start thinking now and start adjusting now to the upcoming impending changes that are occurring. Inflation and taxes, in my view, probably going forward are going to be some of the most important aspects that we're going to be dealing with in the next year, 2 or so, decade plus. So starting in a year or 2 and going forward probably the next decade or longer, we're going to have to be dealing with these things and addressing it accordingly. Again, that positive arbitrage you can pick up is going to be a powerful aspect of it. How do you offset inflation? Let's say we have a higher inflation situation and higher tax situation, and we're trying to put money away for retirement. How do we address that? How do we offset that? Well, one solution that's often talked about is working longer. Means you have to earn money longer because you're going to need more of it because of inflation to be able to supplement retirement. Now, look, if your situation is such that you can do that and want to do that, that's great. Obviously, that's a good solution. But here's the problem. It's not always available. In other words, what if health issues occur and prevent you from working longer with your business or job, okay, like you planned to? I can't tell you how many times I've seen that situation occur. Or the economic situation changes, or your job situation or business or company or whatever changes. We certainly saw a lot of that this past year with COVID and the shutdowns. There were massive changes that occurred. And starting over in your 60s, let's say, or 70s even, can be very daunting. That can be a daunting challenge. Not that it can't be done, but certainly may not be something you want to take on at that point in your life career, if you know what I'm saying. There's some other solutions to this that can be addressed, which we're going to talk about in the next segment. So I'm really going to encourage you to stay tuned. How do we offset the impending tax and inflation changes that we're very likely going to face? Stay tuned.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show, and today we're really talking about, well, how do you plan for future higher taxes and higher inflation? Because the reality is we've been, I don't know if the word's spoiled, because it depends on which side of the coin you are, but we've definitely been in a situation where we've had historically low tax rates. I mean, go back to forget the politics for a minute. The math is the actual brackets and all that kind of stuff. If I've got a chart I can show you, be happy to do so. If you want to contact me at yourpersonalbank.com, show you the historical income tax rates since the beginning of the income tax for the past 100 years. We are at currently one of the lowest income tax rate environments in history. We are also in the lowest inflation time, one of them, in history. So interest rates, inflation are low, taxes are low. And people have been operating under that system. We've been operating under that economic system now for over a decade. Our federal government, that is, has stepped up federal spending to a level unprecedented in the history of man. More dollars likely means higher inflation. Our federal government also has stated that they plan to increase taxes. Now, I understand a lot of people think, well, it's only going to be on the rich or those making over a certain amount. The fact is, this is basic economics 101, financial literacy. When taxes are increased, whether you pay a higher tax rate directly or not doesn't matter. Higher taxes affect everyone. How? Well, if a business, for example, they're talking about increasing the business, the corporate tax rate. If a business is taxed at a higher rate, does the business pay more taxes? Directly, yes, they write bigger checks because a bigger percentage goes to, the IRS. But do they actually pay the tax? And the answer is no. What the business does is one of two things, or a combination of these two things, and that is they increase the price of the items they're selling, the products or services they're selling, so therefore the consumer pays the tax, don't they? Whoever buys their product or service pays the tax. Or the business reduces expenses. Jobs and other things are reduced. So most businesses do a combination of the two, but the reality is the people that thought that they were sticking it to the man and making the business pay more tax, well, if you understand economics, you'll realize that the business isn't affected at all. It's the consumers or the worker, the employees, or a combination of those who are actually negatively affected. Inflation, here's the thing, and I shared this in previous shows, my tremendous frustration in the fact that the majority of Americans view the government sending out these checks as favorable. The key point to understand why I'm not favorable to this is, again, a lack of financial literacy, lack of understanding how money really works. The key point, and this is not political, this is basic common sense. So, look, if you're in favor and you think it's positive that the government's sending out checks to folks, please understand something. The government has no money. I've shared this concept, this idea over and over again, and I suppose I'm going to continue to do so, either until I'm forced to stop somehow, or people start to grasp and understand this basic economic concept, and that is our government has no money. Whatever they spend, whatever they give out is not theirs. They've done one of two things. They either took it from someone else, a taxpayer, which means it's our money, not theirs, or they printed extra dollars, which creates inflation. Because there's more dollars chasing items, therefore the cost of the items go up. So the thing is, whether you received a check or not, this is something I stated in a previous show, you and I are going to pay many times more than what the government actually issued, whether you got a check or not. And what we're going to do is we're going to pay it in terms of the cost of higher taxes and higher inflation, the higher cost of goods and services. And this isn't something we're going to escape, any one of us, because we're talking about stuff like food, clothing, housing, stuff that we need. So even if you're not wasting money on the extras, you're still going to pay more because of inflation, more dollars chasing items. Well, again, whether it's food, clothing, housing, or anything else for that matter, we're going to pay many times more than that over the next several years. Okay? This is a key to understand. Plus, this is also a key to understand to not run out of money in retirement. So stay tuned in the last segment here. I'm going to cover this in depth in terms of how do we offset? What are the things we can do to help stymie higher taxes and inflation?
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
Okay, welcome back. We are rounding third and coming into home on this. And what we're talking about today is how do we plan accordingly with higher taxes and inflation likely staring us in the face. See, this last decade or so, we've definitely been in an environment where taxes have been historically low. One of the lowest tax rate environments in the past 100 years since the income tax was created or imposed, however you want to look at it. We're in one of the lowest interest rate environments in history. Inflation has been extremely low as a result, too. With what's the economic, political, tax situation that we're facing now, it appears very likely, increasingly likely that all that is going to change. We're going to be in a higher tax environment, higher inflation environment, and higher interest rate environment. What can you do to offset that to make sure, well, you do have enough to retire on and not run out of money in retirement? It is one of the number one fears of retirees, by the way, and understandably so. Well, one thing is you need to have more money. Make sure you have some more money and make sure you have more of it that can still grow and shine in that kind of environment. Well, one thing you can do is work longer. That's one of the things solutions have brought up. And again, if that's a viable option for you and you enjoy your work and things, and that's great. But not everyone enjoys what they're doing or wants to keep working or can. Health issues, economic issues, and various things can derail those plans. I think Your Personal Bank is one of the key solutions because of the positive arbitrage, the ability to earn interest on money you spend because your dividends you're getting paid are higher than the interest you're getting charged from the bank, and you keeping the difference, again, on dollars you spend. I think that's a powerful tool to enhance or expand or ensure the money continues to last, okay? Another solution, of course, is you can purchase tangible assets, things that have most likely increase in value, things like real estate, okay? And again, like you've heard some of the previous shows I've talked to, and even when I interviewed John Burley a couple of weeks ago, he and I discussed that using Your Personal Bank to purchase real estate can be a tremendous advantage, again, because of the positive arbitrage. The dollars you use to purchase the real estate can also still earn some interest for you going forward every year for the rest of your life. It's a powerful tool, certainly worth looking at. Contact me at yourpersonalbank.com further if you're interested in that type of thing. Another solution that can be done is there's a lot of annuity products these days that offer guaranteed lifetime income riders. So you have guarantees in terms of how much money you can earn and get paid in retirement. There's, like I said, products that have tremendous rates of return these days. You can get up to a 10% bonus initially and up to 7% growth rate on the money while you defer it until you start to turn it on for income. That can be a tremendous solution. And again, contact me at yourpersonalbank.com. Be happy to discuss that with you. In other words, it appears, seems obvious, more and more so, that things are going to be significantly different going forward. So we need to take significant actions to do so. I think another thing that's becoming increasingly clear, and I don't want to get too political about this, but it hits me very personally, and that's the border situation. First of all, we got to ask the question of why are our borders much more open than they were before? In other words, if the current administration wanted to shut down the border, certainly they could. I mean, we have the wherewithal. It was done previously in the last administration, whether you liked Trump or not. It's hard to argue the fact that there was far fewer people coming across the border illegally in the past administration versus the current one. Again, why? If they wanted to stop it, they could. So you got to ask the question, why? Why do they want this? Well, big business, corporations prefer lower wages. More people coming in, more workers, reduces the overall weight competition, particularly on the lower end of the spectrum for businesses and corporations that have high need for lower income or lower cost workers. That's a great benefit for them. I mean, there's no two ways about it. It's hard to argue. And if you look at who supported Biden and that, there's many of those types of businesses and industries that did. Big business, basically. From a political standpoint, the current administration, I don't know what other way to put it other than it seems to be a political move to hopefully obtain additional voters going forward. It doesn't really benefit the citizens and the people of this country. And by the way, the polls show something like 75% of all Americans prefer legal immigration. This hits me personally because I am a first-generation American. I was born here. My dad, if you haven't heard the story, escaped from the Soviets in 1956 from an oppressive government, the communist government. He was, some of the stories go, was shot at trying to, crossing the border, escaping. That's pretty intense. He ended up in the United States legally as a political refugee, legitimately. Went through the process, became a U.S. citizen. Took him a number of years, of course, to do that, and became a productive citizen. He was an acoustical engineer and all that kind of stuff, and that's why I'm here. I'm half Hungarian, first generation. I can't think of a situation where I've talked to an immigrant, a legal immigrant, I should say, or a first generation person who was positive about illegal immigration, people coming over without the proper process. See, immigrants understand, or first generation certainly understand the challenges, the risks, many times everything they gave up to come here to this country because of the opportunity that was here. I shared this story before. A good friend of mine, he's a doctor from India. Actually, he grew up in Africa, but he's Indian descent. He was a citizen of, I think, England, I believe. I know he went to college there. And I asked him this not too long ago. Once he was of age, maturity, he could have gone anywhere in the world, literally. And I said, why did you choose the U.S.? And the answer is almost universal when you ask folks like that. And it's because of the opportunities that the U.S. offers. This is a frustrating situation because due to, I believe, short-term thinking from businesses wanting lower wages and a political party wanting voters, they're willing to allow a situation that's very inhumane, encouraging people who are in desperate situations, or at least not discouraging them. How's that? Not being very clear and discouraging them. These are people that are desperate, will take tremendous risks, literally risk their lives in many cases, and put themselves in a position of many illegal entities like the coyotes, like the human traffickers, and put themselves at risk, many times minors, these kids, to come here to the U.S. because of, it is still, compared to where they're coming from, the land of opportunity. And honestly, for anyone to not strongly discourage that is supremely inhumane. People will be taken advantage of, the sex traffickers, the illegal drugs, some people will die attempting to get here. And to not dramatically, forcibly stop that is frankly inhumane. It's saddening. I find it incredibly frustrating, but it's also going to have significant impacts on our country and on us, on our people, and our economics and all that. There's talk now of many of these illegal immigrants getting COVID payments. Why? Why should somebody who's not even a citizen of this country benefit from that? Much less someone who didn't come here legally. I understand the political reasons behind it, but the common sense reasons are just so incredibly frustrating. It makes me wonder what kind of country we really are and become. And why do we, the voters, allow our representatives to act this way, to make decisions and spend our money? Remember, if these COVID payments go to illegal aliens, who paid for it? You and I did, the taxpayer. And even if you didn't pay taxes, you're still going to pay for it through increased inflation, because more dollars in the system creates inflation. And a significant amount of extra dollars have gone in the system. So folks, we're all going to pay the price. Just for some political benefit for some people now short term at least, maybe. And for some corporations, big business, who frankly, in many cases, they might be located or let's say domiciled in the U.S., but many of them do as much or more of their business overseas than the U.S. So their focus is, their loyalties and their focus is not necessarily here. And if they get a better deal elsewhere, don't you think they just pick up and move their headquarters elsewhere to reduce taxes or various things? Many of them do all that stuff already, basing themselves offshore and various things like that. Many large businesses can do that. So why are we catering to those interests? In fact, why are we allowing that to happen? And I guess here's the last thought I want to leave. And I heard this and I thought it was a very astute observation. Basically, in this past year or so, the media, the politicians, everything have done everything they can to encourage us, Americans, to divide and be mad at each other and attack each other. And until we realize that the enemy is not the other people on the other side of the other political party, the enemy is the elected officials and the bureaucracy that's in Washington. They're the common enemy. And even though somebody may be conservative or liberal or Democrat or Republican, and they may have different views on things, we need to realize and come together that our common enemy is not each other. It's the ones in charge trying to cause us to fight with each other. And until the majority learns that, we're going to continue down this path. So I hope and pray that we come to our senses and learn that lesson. And as always, and as long as it's still on our money, in God we trust.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. This show is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information. The presenter and guest on this program do not engage in legal, accounting, or tax advice. Professional advice regarding your situation should be sought if required. Products and riders may have limitations and may not be available in all states. Excessive unpaid loans may affect performance. Distributions may become taxable if not managed properly. Replacements may not be suitable for everyone. There may be charges when replacing coverage. Compare when considering a replacement. Dividend rates and baseline of credit rates may change. Contact yourpersonalbank.com for current rates.